G, and you are locked into Six Towns Radio.
Broadcasting to Stoke-on-Trent and the world. This is Six Towns Radio.
Okay, my special guest today is poet Mr. G. Hello there, how are you doing today?
Hey, how you doing, Terry?
Not bad at all, not bad at all. We've got you on the line to talk about a few things, but let's start at the beginning. Let's talk poetry. When I was younger, the only TV and radio poet I can think of was Pam Ayres.
Right.
So what got you into it? Was it through the media or was it at school?
I wish I could say that I knew someone as amazing as Pam Ayres. I just like playing around. I just like playing around with words. Basically, that's what it is. I just sort of would like to start putting words together and stuff like that. I can't really. I don't know. It's just I like pretty words. That's it. I like anyone that can put words together well. I like them.
I suppose when I got a bit older and I got into music a little bit more, I got into hip hop, and hip hop to me is poetry.
Well, I mean, again, I'm a huge hip hop fan. If you want to talk about like music, then wow, hip hop is my music. And for me, I would see hip hop as being it's the modern day exponent of poetry. Yeah. When people talk about why isn't there a revival of poetry? Why isn't there how come Byron, Shelley, Keats were like superstars in their day or stuff like that? Well, basically, you're looking at if you're looking at a rapper, you're looking at a poet.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. And even Kanye had a dabble recently, I've seen online. He did a couple of good lines, but one of them that I liked was, he said, Ralph Lauren was boring before I wore him. I thought that was quite a good line.
Right. Yeah, well, again, it's the right words for the right time. I mean, many of the raps, they're basically for the time. They're of the moment. Some poems are meant to last a day. Some poems will last like hundreds of years. People have this belief that like back in the day, the poets of like say 200 years ago didn't talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. If you listen to like loads of old sea shanties or loads of old pub songs, you'll probably hear some of the most bawdiest stuff you've ever heard in your life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I always view it as just playing around with words. It's people use words to express themselves, and we express our loves, our lusts, our joys, our pains, our lusts, everything, all the visceral, amazing things that it takes for a human being to be alive. These are all explored through our words and through our poetry, through our songs, through our architecture, through everything. It's just an expression of life.
Songwriting and poetry are different, but if you deconstruct it a little bit, they're similar in so many ways. Have you ever been tempted to write full songs?
I've written lyrics. I mean, I've written lyrics for MCs. I've written lyrics for singers. Sorry, I lost the words just there. Lyrics for singers. And I've actually written dialogue for comedians, and I've written for like dialogue for actors. And the thing I notice is that when poetry, all you've just got is just yourself and your words and trying to communicate those ideas to the audience or the listener or whoever's like taking in your medium. When you start talking about writing songs, you've got to allow the word space to breathe while people take in the music as well. So you can't overload something with words, right? Same thing as when you're writing for, if you're writing, say, comedy, you've got to always build up to some form of a punchline or some form of a comedic release that allows the audience to breathe through their laughter. So you're using different skills. And when you're used to just writing poetry, you're just used to saying, right, I'm just going to put everything I've got into this poem. And then when you start meeting people that write, like, especially screenplays and stuff like that, they say, hey, man, just take out some of the words, let it breathe, let it breathe. Everything you say in this word can be used in a gesture. Or you talk to a musician, they say, everything you say in this word could be used in a bridge or like a synth can say, transmit that feeling that you're trying to transmit through the words. So I found I actually had to strip words back in order to write for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to get you on the phone, because I knew you'd be the guy to talk about this, because I know on your Radio 4 show, for instance, you talked to songwriters and poets, and you talked about poets liking songwriting and vice versa, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. We did an Easter special of Rhyme and Reason, where I sit down and talk to songwriters about their poetical influences. And so, we spoke to Noel Gallagher. He was like a big fan of John Cooper Clarke. We spoke to this guy called Jordan from Rizzle Kicks, and he liked Rudyard Kipling. And we spoke to Ian McMillan, who's a poet, and he liked what was the name of that group? I forgot the name of that group. He liked some weird Oh, Captain Beefheart. That was some weird 1970s punk. So I don't even know what they were. I've never heard of them before. I was just like hearing noise in the background, and he was there jamming away and grooving to it. I said, hey, whatever floats your boat, man, it's good for you, then it makes good radio.
Yeah, I suppose I could see Noel Gallagher's influence there from John Cooper Clarke with the punk poetry. And you still see John Cooper Clarke up and down today, which is quite interesting. You were, of course, Poet Laureate on the infamous Russell Brand show with Noel Gallagher.
Yes, that's what I'll forever be known with, forever be linked with, you know what I mean? For all my sins and my saving graces.
Again, with Noel Gallagher and Matt Morgan. How did your paths first cross, you and Russell Brand? Because I suppose you were both on the scene doing stand-up in a way.
There was a night in Brixton, because I was like DJing in Brixton and trying out poetry in Brixton, and there was a night in Brixton that I wanted to just go and practice poems, and so I just turned up there, and I met Russell there. So it was like maybe that's my second or third time performing, and I met Russell there, and this is when he was like back on drugs and he was like pretty much off his head, and I don't know, for some reason we really, really hit it off. He performed and then I performed after him, and he liked some of the stuff I did and I liked some of the stuff he did. He was cracking loads of jokes about the Twin Towers back then. That's how long ago it was, right? And we just really, really hit it off. And then he invited me to DJ at one of his gigs. He had a gig in North London in some tiny little pub, and he builds everything up to be really big. He goes, oh, it's really amazing, it's really fantastic. Oh my God, it's avant-garde poetry and comedy and art and blah blah blah. And you go there, there's only like say 3 people there, and one of them's his mum. You know what I mean? And you realise, oh wow, this is not going to be what I thought it was going to be. But he's a guy that he always gets into trouble and gets into adventures. Yeah. Right, so he might ring you up and he's been arrested and stuff like that. So he's one of those friends you just find funny to hang around with. Every time he rings you up, it's never a sane conversation. You know what I mean?
We've all got a friend like that, but
exactly, a nutter, isn't it?
He takes it to the next level, and of course he repaid the favour by taking you on tour recently when he did his big stand-up tour, didn't he?
Yeah, I think I've done most of the big tours with him. You know, like he brings me out and I'm meant to try and warm the crowd up with some poetry. And what's funny is that my poems aren't funny. That's what I find actually quite amusing. I stand up there and I try and get through some jokes just to ease them to the idea of me about to hit them with a poem. And then the poem's usually like, quite kind of like serious, because I guess that's the kind of poetry that I tend to write when I'm performing live. And so, most of them at the major gigs and the major tours. The last tour we did was out in Australia. It was Australia and New Zealand, which was like an absolute blast. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it's just an adventure. I live pretty much the bohemian life of a poet. I just sort of have poems, will travel, sort of like write, perform, wherever I end up, wherever I wake up in the morning, that's where I am. That's pretty much how I live. So I think he just drags me along so he can keep an eye on me.
Obviously, he's calmed down a lot, I'd say, nowadays. But you've been through some scrapes. I've got to just mention the Andrew Sachs thing, just briefly.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because that phone call, I think because of who he was, became so massive in the media. Were you expecting that sort of exposure or response?
No, not really. I mean, because the thing is, like, when you do, like, you yourself, you're on the radio, right? You're in like some tiny little room with a mic and a few mixers and a desk. Do you know what I'm saying? The idea of who's listening to what we're saying now isn't really crossing our minds. This is a phone call conversation, as far as I'm concerned. Do you know what I mean? You know, and so that's how we ran the show. We ran the show in a very, very closed world. So it's just like me, Russ, and Matt, and just maybe like a few other guys. And so it was that kind of sort of like sitting at someone's house, dumb TV on mute, playing dumb tunes, whatever, you know what I mean, and just having a laugh. And so you don't really think, I suppose, of the further implications of anything that you would say. And so it was kind of funny because when people say to me, "Oh, that was such a terrible thing," I was like, "Wow, did you listen to the show?" Because that was the lightest of things we did, man. We did things that were like 100 times worse, but that's not really a good defense when you've got the whole country chasing after you.
Yeah, Russell knew that his Hollywood career was kicking off, and probably the radio was something he could fall back on.
Not really, because the thing is, it's very 2020 makes perfect vision, right? You're speaking in hindsight, right? At the time, nothing major had broken off, and he was just doing little bits and bobs. Right? Realistically, if he gone to Hollywood and it flopped, think about it, you've hardly ever seen him back on English TV or in English media since. Do you know what I mean, right? Because there was like this sort of like stone wall kind of blocking him and everything else we did. We've only just managed to try and get the radio show back in a slight little form when we did it on, XFM for the Teenage Cancer Trust. All right, so, there's a silent wall that's kind of blocking things, do you know what I mean? So if he'd gone to Hollywood and flopped, man, you probably wouldn't have heard of him again.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did radio, though, because I think it's changed radio for the better. I know I have to pre-record a lot of stuff now, but like this.
Yeah,
but,
sign a lot of forms.
But yeah, it's a great form of media, listening to stuff. It's a theatre of the mind, I like to think. And, you can get so much emotion through music, but the talk, I think when you're sitting there with headphones on, listening to radio, it's just a totally different thing than watching stuff.
Well, if you think about it, the beauty of radio is it's just audio. It just goes back to that old sort of like ballad sort of form of storytelling. Do you know what I mean? And so anyone that's got like a very fertile imagination, anyone that can paint pictures, like paint rainbows in the sky, throw meteors and comets into their stories, and the most outlandish, almost Shaggy Dog story that any person could come and vocalize, you can get away with that on radio. If you try to put that on TV or put that in Hollywood, you need like £1 billion worth of special effects. Do you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
But you can just get almost as stupid and as absurd and as abstract when you're just speaking, and it's one of the most human things. And so when they place too many restrictions on people being able to say what they want to say, right, it's almost like they're taking a part of your humanity away. Do you know what I mean? There's a part of me that just thinks, let everybody say what they want to say. The public will decide what's good and what's bad. You know what I'm saying? And the fact is, no matter what anyone wants to say about like how supposedly terrible the effects of that scandal was, right? It was a very, very popular show, and people still talk about it. In fact, you're still talking to me about it, I don't know how many, 5, 6, 7 years later, means that it obviously had an effect.
The amount of people who hadn't actually heard it, who still complain about it, was quite brilliant as well. People just like jump on that bandwagon, don't they?
Exactly, man, you know what I mean? Hence why my number's still withheld, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Radio hasn't got a watershed, which is weird. TV after 9 o'clock, you can sort of say what you want and do what you want, well, within reason. But radio, 9 o'clock, it comes and goes because that's never changed.
Yeah, I've never thought about that, actually. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that, like, the in some degree, I suppose that, when you've got, like public broadcasting and stuff like that, it's very difficult when you come from a stand-up background where you stand up on like little stage and little pubs and whatever, and you really do just say what you want to say. Do you know what I mean, right? And then when you start entering, I suppose, the medium of radio and then the medium of film and the medium of television, then everything brings with it its own different forms of restrictions. And those restrictions, sometimes they're sort of like an ill-fitting suit at a wedding you didn't want to be invited to. Do you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, I guess, you just got to work with it the best way you can and just try and make the best of it. And the people who you hail as being geniuses, like the people who like the Ricky Gervaises or the Peter Cooks, or if you want to go way back in radio, who's that guy, the Goon lot, the Peter Sellers and all them dudes, you know what I'm saying, right? The Spike Milligans. They just basically they looked at the restrictions and they said, okay, we're going to push these restrictions as far as we can for our era. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the job of an artist. That's the job of a comedian. That's even the job of a poet. That's the job of a musician. Just push the boundaries as far as you can, just to see if those boundaries are valid. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I suppose with your work as a poet, you've been lucky enough to be able to do workshops and work with other people from all different backgrounds. That's a great thing to do.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I mean, for me, poetry's opened up so many doors. Like, I sometimes look back to those, like, early days, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago, when I just first started writing. I never imagined that I would be performing, going to different countries, and going into like schools and colleges and stuff like that. But probably one of the best examples of stuff that I've been able to do is that I do a lot of work at Brixton Prison, like just a lot of voluntary work. Just go up there and read poems on there's a prison radio association, so there's an internal radio within all the prisons, and I just go in there and I read poems. And I got a chance to actually visit prisons up and down the UK and do poetry workshops and creative writing workshops, and get to speak to prisoners in different parts of the country and in different stages of the correctional institutions, and just, I suppose, it was an exchange of stories. That's whenever I speak to people, and whenever I do my poems, or whenever I perform, it really is just an exchange of stories. The word poetry actually gets in the way because people imagine they're going to be set homework and stuff like that. I'm some Michael Gove type character, you know what I mean? It's going to come in and mark everything they're going to do, do you know what I mean? But really, it's just an exchange of stories, and it's allowed me to meet people that I probably never would have ordinarily met if I hadn't started picking up a pen and writing.
When you're sitting down to write, is there a zone you've got to be in, or a frame of mind you've got to be in?
That was one of the most amusing things, I suppose, about doing Russell shows. Like, people used to say, "Oh, we don't hear from you to the end, And I'm like, mate, I'm in another zone. I'm in another world. You know what I mean? When I sit down to write, I'm literally, boy, my brain is at the edge of the universe. Do you know what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
I try and put myself so far away from where I am, and then look down upon it. Do you know what I mean? So I could then give an overview of it. So even when I'm writing a poem, if I write a poem about, like, say, something like, I don't know, like a pomegranate, right?
Yeah.
I will try and think of everything outside of a pomegranate. Then I'll write all these weird things down, and then I'll go back to writing about a pomegranate. And so even when you hear the poem about the pomegranate, you just think, oh, it's just a poem about a pomegranate. But the process I've gone through just to write about that has almost killed me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Going back to the radio show, that's what I used to think about the zone, because you put in that room for a couple of hours, and you've got to think of this poem by the end. And if you're not really in that frame of mind, it must have been difficult.
Oh, yeah, because, wow, I can't lie. The fact is, man, I had to get up every Saturday. and we all know there's always something for you to do on a Saturday.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There was a point where I ended up having to turn my phone off, I remember, because my phone would just be blowing up. Right? And so I remember I'd just sit there and just trying to soak in everything that's going on. You're trying to capture the spirit of the show. That's what you're trying to do.
With so many distractions, though.
Yeah. No, but the distractions are good because, I've got a fairly good understanding of the way Russ and Matt work. Do you know what I mean? The way they bounce ideas and stuff like that. And you're just trying to sort of pick the ones that are most poignant to their own personalities. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the mad part is just when it starts to get say, I don't know, 10 minutes, because I'm writing all these different words down on sheets of paper, and then in the last 10 minutes, then I'm just praying that I'm going to get the touch from the creator on my brain, and the poem will just suddenly emerge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right? It's like giving birth, you know what I mean? And at the end of it, so it's a boy, you know what I mean? Right? Start handing out cigars and stuff like that, man, you know?
Yeah. So what's next for you? I know you do a lot of poetry readings, and we've mentioned the stuff you do with the communities. Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, the next thing I'm doing another big project actually within the prisons. I'm based at Brixton Prison, so the next big thing for me is going to be we're going to make a series of prison programs. Again, you won't be able to hear it unless you get locked up within the next 5 months, right? You ain't be able to hear it.
That's
right?
a hardcore fan. That is a hardcore fan who'll do that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm going to do a crime and get locked up just so I can hear Mr. G's prison program, Right? But yeah, that's the next main project that I'm working on. Where again, I think we're doing about 26 different prisons up and down the country, and we're just going there and we're going to do little workshops with people and try and create nice little snippets of radio shows which pertain to their individual prisons, and then it gets broadcast within their prison. Because the one we did that got broadcast up and down, it was mainly based at only the big boys, like the Brixtons and the Manchesters, and I can't remember where else we went. We're up to Edinburgh and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So that's going to be a pretty intensive project running through August. And I'm at the Ledbury Festival in July. And I run a collective group called Chill Pill down in London, and we put on monthly nights, and that's I work with about maybe I think 4 other young poets, these dudes are early 20s and stuff like that, and so we put on nights that basically put on other poets within the scene. So I'm always trying to sort of keep the UK poetry scene alive and kicking and vibrant, you know what I'm saying? Because it gave birth to me, and hopefully it'll give birth to some, future stars. Yeah,
definitely. There's some great poets around, the Doc Browns and yourself, and it's great that it is quite a cool thing.
Yeah, no, it really is. There's something in it. I mean, it's one of those things. There's such a long tradition, right, of poetry in England, right, and it's one of those things where you can try and deny it and try and say, oh man, this is some boring stuff and blah, 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 blah. But this is something that really taps into the psyche of the land. Do Do you know what I mean? You know, there's something of the land that actually brings out the poetry within the people. So even within the humor, even within the way in which people, again, the turns of phrases, the whole idea of innuendo, stuff like, stuff that you take for granted, right? There's a very poetical flow in the way in which people speak.
Good old Albion. I've got one final question for you. What is the best rhyme that you ever made?
I don't know what the best rhyme is. I don't know the best. I used to have a rhyme that said the back of the bus was attractive to us, and people seemed to like that. Do you know what I mean? I can tell you the worst rhyme that I ever wrote, and the worst rhyme was when we did a live performance of the radio show at the Bloomsbury Theatre, and I think Noel Gallagher came down and he did like a song, and the worst, I can't even repeat the rhyme on radio, but the rhyme was sort of like, we'll be back on the radio, up to our old stunts, and I named about 5 expletives, and the last expletive rhymes with stunts. You know?
Yeah, I think we can all guess what it was.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying, right? And I wrote it cringing, thinking, oh, this is never going to work. This is so cringeworthy, but obviously it brought the house down.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. I know you're Mr. G Poet on Twitter. You can get you on SoundCloud, Mixcloud, etc. But yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for being part of the broadcast today.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Terry, man. You know, hope everything goes well with you and everything that you do.
Take care.
Okay, you too. Take care.